Hello, hello, and good morning. And I think I'm supposed to talk as if I'm talking to the first 4 rows, but I can tell I'm talking to the next hall because it's way jacked up. So if you didn't know that we're starting, we're starting. And if you want to be super cool, you know all the new SharePoint news, you're going to get a lot of depth now. Based off of what Jeff and team shared, you're going to go into the next double click of that. And then the rest of the week is really the triple click. You're going to be taken into the weeds of all the new SharePoint. And of course, just SharePoint in general, wherever you can find it. First order of business, does everybody have their SharePoint socks? Yeah. Jeremy?
Check.
All right. So if you want a pair of SharePoint socks, go to the booth. We do have 1 pair to give away here at the end. First person to ask a question at the mic when we officially ask for Q&A. We know you're dying for them, and we hope you wear them and know that your feet will be warm with SharePoint all over.
If it's not a good question, you only get 1 sock. We'll hold the other one for the second question.
Right.
So.
That's right. But if you're thinking about the cloud or SharePoint, wherever you want to deploy it, you shouldn't have any cold feet moving there. So we really want to move in. Just so you know who I am, I'm Mark Cashman. I'm on the marketing side of the house, and I report under Dan Holmes, Seth Patton, all the way up to all the fun big names you might know. And
my name's Jeremy Massner. I'm a group program manager on the engineering team that builds a bunch of the features we're going to show today. We're focused on team collaboration and how teams work and integrate with groups, both for the cloud and for on-prem SharePoint. Really excited to get to show off more of the work that you've got a little taste of this morning with Jeff.
Yeah. So first question you might ask yourself is, what can SharePoint do for me? And really the session this morning hopefully answered that, really addressed a lot of what you see here. Just to level set where we're headed in this session so you know where you're at, a lot of the focus will be around team sites, SharePoint team sites, connected to Office 365 groups and beyond, and really that focus of being able to share and work as a team. There's a lot of things that are incorporated in a lot of the icons and the messaging, and really the focus of here is to dive into what can I do with a team site? What can a team site do for me, I think is the better question. But as you think in terms of the glue between all of these experiences, it is SharePoint. SharePoint helps you do how to work with a team. It helps you communicate more broadly. It helps you or gives you the tool set to be able to build out business applications. And a lot of those will come at the level of when you're working with a team. You may need a number of these different capabilities. A lot of them are out of the box, or you build them very quickly. When it comes to talking to end users, I hope you like a lot of what the team has been building from a user interface. You're going to see the user interface across mobile and web, but again, specifically to what we're doing with team sites. And of course, we're focused on what can admins do? How can they better control the environment? How they can enable their end users while keeping things under control. And finally, you're going to see some things that we'll talk about here, but there's definitely a double or triple click session when it gets into extending the SharePoint experience. But really it is, what can SharePoint do for developers? And there's a lot. Specifically to team sites, a lot of times, certainly they're extended. Another way to slice and dice through it is, what are you doing with SharePoint? And really there are 3 places where you can go and do things with SharePoint. And sometimes you can look at it from a files perspective. I have a personal file. Maybe some of the blogs that went out today, one of the scenarios for me is I wrote the blog in my personal OneDrive just as an early draft, shared it out with some few key folks, and then when I got to some broader review, I pushed that into our team site where more people could access it, more people are aware of it. But really that's where I went from using my personal files, pushing them into the team site for where other members could access it, or I, of course, let them know that it was now there and ready for their review. When it gets to the point in time when we get back out of Ignite and we want to then communicate it across the whole company at Microsoft, or if you have a big message, a big takeaway from MS Ignite, you might start writing news, creating sites that are more for communication. But all through that, you see SharePoint is really helping you go from my work, teamwork, to then broadly communicating across the company. And you, of course, can dial it up from what's private. If it's just in my personal OneDrive, then it's usually just me, the owner. Until I share it, it's only accessible to me. And as you go from left to right, of course, you up-level that. A lot of what you'll see beyond files is, of course, what does SharePoint give me as other tools beyond documents? Pages, news, lists, and business apps. So again, take it a little bit deeper before we get into demo. Jeremy?
Yeah, so I think we just wanted to talk briefly about why we focus so much on teamwork in that taxonomy Mark was talking about, and why it's different from just having, say, a shared folder in a OneDrive, which you can of course do and is a fine way to share files out. But we think when people are actually working as a team, over the long haul, there are a few distinct things you want to keep in mind. One is you really do want the content to be shared from the start. You don't want to have to make an explicit decision about starting private and then moving it in with the team. Number two is you want to make sure that as more people join the team, as people move in and out, as teams shift over time, everyone gets to have the same context, and so it's very useful to have that shared group object that's hanging out in the directory. As people come and go, they all get access to all the same content, all the same history of the team and the collaboration. Number three is we think that the way you manage policy and life cycle of a group is often different from the way you manage it for an individual person. So for example, there'll be some cases, we saw some this morning in the keynote, where you can say very clearly, this is a person who can't share externally, or this is a person who belongs to this particular part of the company where a policy applies. And that's great in the personal context, but it might be different in a team where there might be a policy that is unique to that team collaboration. So you might want to say, this team, the content is highly confidential, and so we shouldn't share it externally. Or this team is working on a project that we know we need to retain legal records for, so we want to apply a particular policy around records for that site. So again, it's useful to have that team object, that team concept that you can attach those policies to. And the same thing with lifecycle. OneDrives belong to a person. When someone leaves the company or the organization, their OneDrive goes away, and yes, you have a chance to move the content around, but it's really meant to be, hey, that's the end of that storage place. Teams have their own life cycle, their own place, so that again, as team membership comes and goes, the content always stays there. And then the last thing is we think team collaboration is about a lot more, as Mark was saying, than just a file. In SharePoint, we provide pages, we provide news, we provide apps, we provide lists. And then across Office 365, we have Planner for doing task management, we have Mail and Calendar you can share, we have Microsoft Teams for doing group chat. And so all those things come together when you create one of these Office 365 groups, which are powered by the SharePoint team. Am I doing this one or you want to do it? I win. All right. So just a little bit more context around how we think about the role that SharePoint plays in those Office 365 groups. This is a little bit of a different pivot from one of the other slides you saw. I actually like some of the earlier slides better that have SharePoint right in the middle of all this collaboration. But I just wanted to land this point, which is Office 365 groups provide a real rich diversity of ways to collaborate and communicate with people. And so whether you think about being sort of a mail-first organization where people like to send a lot of mail to a group distribution list, whether you want to use that Microsoft Teams kind of fast real-time chat, whether you think Yammer and broader group collaboration is more appropriate, whether you want to be super focused on a Kanban board in Microsoft Planner, all of those things under the covers create an Office 365 group that is an entity which exists in the directory. You can reason over it. You can set policy over it. It has the notion of owners, of members, of policy and lifecycle, as we talked about. And then every one of those things gets a SharePoint team site underneath to provide the content services. And so however you want to work, wherever you are, you know that your group is going to be powered by a team site that's got the files, the lists, the pages, and the news. And so I think we'll just go into a demo and we'll show some of how that comes together. Yeah. Some of the new things we've got.
We are going to start on mobile. And with that last slide, and you've heard us say the inner loop and the outer loop, you should know that by attending this session, you are now all in the inner loop. So what you're seeing here, I'm on an Android device. Nothing special. Sauce is actually kind of an older Android device, but with a very new update that just went live this morning for both Android. It's version 2. It's got all the features that I'm going to be walking through here, plus a few that I'm not, but I'll talk about them. And there's also a new version of iOS that's just launched today, 3.3, and that's also got a lot of the same capabilities, just in the user experience of an iOS device. And of course, we've got Windows Mobile also available, so that you could download and have some of those same SharePoint experiences. So here I am. I've loaded the SharePoint app, and I'm seeing a bunch of sites. And with this particular session, we'll focus on working with a team site. So I'm going to go into one team site here, the Travel Innovation. And the first thing I wanted to show you is a piece of news. What does news look like on a mobile device? And you'll see in the context of web pretty shortly what a lot of these pages really look like when you look at them through the web browser. So I'm going to tap into the 2017 China trip. And a few things to note here. You saw Dan, if you saw the keynote with Jeff, he was able to bookmark something for later. That icon in the upper right means this is bookmarked for later. I'll show you what that looks like across a number of different assets. And as this flows in, we're loading this up, and you can see that we've got new formatting now with the rich text editor. When you're doing it on the web, you can make different things, colors, different sizes. You can add tables. You can, of course, hyperlink and do lots of different things that you weren't able to do now for the web, and of course, it looks great on mobile. As I scroll down, you can see that we've got a number of different assets. As I swipe through left and right, they come through really nice. They've reflowed and resized on the mobile device. As I keep scrolling, you'll see a lot of different formatting, a lot of different content types, even something like a Bing map. So I'm going to pause here and just show you this is a real interactive map where I can switch, I can pinch and zoom, and if I wanted to, I could really navigate to where even if we landed a pin for a specific location that you wanted to program for that particular web part. But you get a sense that no matter what I drop in here, if I did it on the web, then it's going to look great and reflow great on the mobile. But what we want to also show you, first before I leave here, is I want to leave a comment and say, great trip. Thanks for the pics. And if it's just gobbledygook, that's me. Let's post that anyway. That'll be good for the metadata on that file, don't you think? I think we've just increased discoverability. If you can repeat that hashtag, I'll follow you later.
We're going to hook that up to the real-time translation services to turn that back into English.
That's right. That's right. Your screen's a little smaller than what I was practicing on. So let's go back into the travel innovation. And what I want to do from here is I want to actually create a new news item. So one of the things that was in the new update to the Android device, it was already available to iOS, is the ability to create news on the go. So I'm going to go in here and just add a quick title. I will be a little bit slower and more mindful here. And if you want to say hello back, you can. But I'm going to go in here and now have a pretty simplified way to build out a page or here a news article. And of course, I could do more on the web, but this is just giving you some shortcuts to be able to add text. Hello again. And then below that, I want to add an image. And the best way to add an image is to get the room, and I'll be fair to both sides. All right, right side ready. Say SharePoint Mobile. Nicely done. We'll check that in, and then we'll go under, and once that renders in, we'll add another, we'll add another image. This is going to be a beautiful trip report. All right, left side. Hello, SharePoint Mobile. And then some of these folks here, of course, are asking, what about us? So it'll eat into some of our demo time, but this is pretty important right down the center. All right, ready, center? SharePoint Mobile! Okay. And then just to round it off here, and then we'll publish that and get it going, is of course you can add documents, and it's really going to pull in from what have I been doing recently. So if you think about search and discovery, the quickest way to get to something you were just working on is not to hunt and peck through folders, not to have to go and search through a keyword, but really just to find, yep, that's the document I was looking for. Of course, it's going to look great here. I'm going to publish it down so we can move on. But what that's really doing is it's created a new page in SharePoint to a specific team site, and it's deemed it as news, which means it's going to do a lot of things different than a page. It's going to flow into the new service. It's going to show up on SharePoint Home. It's going to show up on other people's SharePoint mobile device in their news tab, and I'll show you that in a second. But we'll dive into another team site that we call Strategy and Planning. And some of the things that you see first off when you hit a site, especially if you're just starting with a new site, is the list of recent files, recent activities. You really get a sense of what's going on in the team site, which is helpful when you're on the go, just to get a glance of what's happening. If I wanted to see all the news that was happening, not just the news that I'm creating, but that my team members are creating, I can see what the news they're working on. And if I wanted to, here's one that I actually want to save for later. And I'll show you where that loads and lands so that I can get at it later. We also wanted to show you what lists look like. And I'll pause here because it's probably a little bit small for you. But if you look at the second to the last list called Events, that's the one I'm going to go into. Just get a sense of the number of items that are in that list. It's not the millions that certainly you'll see for the rest of the conference, but it's a pretty large list, 19,000 items. And you'll see me just interacting with it and adding a new item on that list. So as I scroll through, obviously this list is loading. I'm able to access it. It's pretty performant. If I wanted to, I can go in and adjust what it is that I wanted to see and have that reflow on the back end. But I'm also just going to go in here and show you. You can, of course, add a new item. And we're going to add Orlando. Again, with the fat fingers. How about ando? I guess I was supposed to put that in the... And then if we wanted to choose the start date, we'll do it tomorrow since we have a little bit of rest time tonight. And you get the sense, of course, that I can now edit and add. Boy, it's really missing that first one. I think it's because it's still loading in the back end. But so that's creating a new item. But certainly I could edit an existing item. And there's a required field. Maybe we'll take care of that in a little bit. So hold that idea of a required field. It's not an accident, but we're going to just discard it so we can move on. And then, so where has all this been going? And we'll wrap up here real quickly, taking a look at something that we just launched. It is a part of the update to the Android device and iOS in both versions that we launched today. And we call it the Me tab. And if you look at at the upper right for Android, it's at the bottom right for iOS. I'm on basically a place for me to go to see what's happening recently around me. And that's the first pivot you see. Here are all the recent files or pages or news that I've either worked on or touched or been interacting with. And I can also pivot down to see just news if I wanted to, so I can filter down. And then if I had chosen an item to save for later, here's my save for later list. We just call it saved. And now I can go through, here's that China report. Let's say I read it. I can also remove it from saved. And now I'm able to get to those other things that I haven't yet gotten to. So on the go, I'm able to save something for later if it's a long article or it's got a lot of information that I want to watch or interact with. And then certainly once I've watched it, I can get rid of it and I can move on to get on to other work. So that's a quick whirlwind tour of the SharePoint mobile app, pretty much from a pivot of what we're doing with team sites and all the content and activity within a team site. And if you join us a session just after this, we'll go into the mobile app in a little bit of a different pivot specific to communications. And one thing new in the app is we support now landscape. Forgot to mention that.
Very cool.
All right, so I'm going to hand it over to Jeremy, and he's going to really take us through the web and lots of depth content.
Yeah, so let's look at sort of 4 different chapters of what we mean by content services and how people work together as a team. The first one I really just want to land is this notion of SharePoint's document library powering the files experience across all of the group workloads that you'll see in Office 365. Part of that means we have really excellent alignment, as you've probably heard already, between SharePoint and OneDrive. We are the same team. We build the same file technology. It shows up in both places. So we get, of course, the same rich thumbnails. Let's find my mouse. Oh, there it is. The same, sort of rich thumbnails that you get on top of all this kind of content. Of course, you can sync all this content down. We have our lovely sync button up here. And all that same content shows up locally, whether you're on a PC or whether you're on a Mac. Of course, you can get to all these files in mobile. And of course, you also get the really nice rich previews, the live previewing service, so we can go in here. We can take something like, here's an email file, which in the past you would have had to download and view locally. We're using our shared previews to give you a view of that right there on the screen. We can also do these fancy ones that everyone likes showing off, the 3D models. You have to be slightly patient because this is a large model here.
Put your HoloLens on now.
Yeah. So again, we're previewing right there. I think what we're saying is more than 270 file types that we can preview directly in SharePoint. But the really key point is it's not just in SharePoint because we are powering this across all these other experiences. So for example, when you pop over to the mailbox that's connected to this group, if you're looking for files to work with, what you see is you get the exact same set of files. So here when I want to go ahead and do an attachment, it knows that this is attached to a group. It brings that same content up right there, and I can go ahead and pick any of these files and bring them in. Also, because we're all connected with the same services underneath, you get the exact same sort of sharing experiences, so I can decide, hey, actually, what do I want the permission on this attachment to be? Should it be something that follows sort of traditional email semantics, which is that anyone who gets this email is able to view the document, or do I want it to be a little bit more restricted only to the particular recipients that I'm sending to? That aligns exactly with the SharePoint permissions. You see the same thing when you go into Planner. Here's a plan where we've attached a bunch of files from the same project, the same group, into some of these cards. You get the exact same view of thumbnails, which is really great there. When you go in and attach a file from within Planner, you get that same picker experience across SharePoint. And of course, the same thing happens in Microsoft Teams. Every Microsoft team, the File tab, is backed by that exact same SharePoint site. So you go in and see the same set of files. And the thing that we showed earlier today is that we now have the exact same set of file previewers integrated in as well. So you get that same experience. There's the email. There we go. There's the cool 3D model. And we'll just do more and more to bring both the same services everywhere and increasingly the exact same experiences through shareable controls and reusable interface elements like that. Okay, so that's a little about files everywhere. Let's go back to SharePoint and talk about metadata and going beyond just files in a folder, but actually how you work more collaboratively as a team. Metadata is really a helpful way, AKA columns, a really helpful way to organize when you've got lots and lots of files. SharePoint scales up to millions of items in a document library, and at that point, even if you're using folders and things to organize, you probably want some extra way to keep track of what's going on. So we have all these columns. I don't know how well those are viewable in the back there, but you can see we've got stakeholders and regions and review dates and status and all those sorts of things that help us organize. It's super easy to add new columns. We've brought that all into this modern UX that we're looking at. Even the more complicated column types like multi-choice, you can go ahead and fill all those things in. And we really went out of our way to bring as much as possible into the modern experience so you don't feel like you have to go back to classic. So here you can decide whether you want multiple selections or not. You can even add in some column validation right here, really trying to bring all that experience right into place where you need it. And then to take advantage of all that metadata, we have the filters pane. And so it's super easy to go from even the largest of lists to go down and find just a couple files that you want. So here are the files that pertain to the South America region. We're waiting patiently for the network to come through here. Waiting very patiently for the network to come through. Maybe we'll come back. But you get the basic idea there. We're able to use this filters pane to get down to just the files that we care most about. Oh, hey, there we go. Thank you, network. And we quickly filter down there. And of course, you can do more filtering on top of that. You can save that as a view. You can pin files, lots and lots of ways to customize that document library and make it work for your teammates and for the people you're collaborating with. We're also really excited to bring metadata back to Office. So for those who haven't seen it, this is in one of the early release channels in Office now. When you're working with one of these SharePoint files, we've now got the ability to view that metadata directly from within Word on the desktop. So you go over here to View Properties, and we're able to bring up that exact same list of metadata. You can edit it here. Change these values, and it shows up back on the list.
Before you take that away, does anybody remember what this was originally called? Dip.
Dip. Yes.
Now going forward is SharePoint Properties. So we've up-leveled the SharePoint brand into Office. Go figure.
Yeah, again, you'll see more and more of these integrations. You saw earlier, if you were in Jeff's keynote, that we're bringing the sharing dialog, SharePoint UX directly into Office for that. This is also directly powered by SharePoint. This is not Win32 code running here. This is actually using that same service-connected experience to bring in more and more pieces of SharePoint into the Office apps. So we're super excited about those. Let's shift and talk about how you work with the rest of those group connected applications and workloads that really enrich your experience. Let's start from just within this library here. Let me clear, whoops. Let's clear that filter back out. So we'll show a couple different things. One thing that's relatively new is our integration with Microsoft Forms, which is our sort of lightweight survey and polling tool that we've had out in the consumer space for quite some time. That is now integrated in with Office 365 groups. So when you're in a document library, you can go ahead and say, create one of these forms. It's a really easy way to take a poll. Do you like SharePoint? And we're going to go ahead and create one of these things. Did I click on the wrong place? Sorry, let's try that one more time. I think I clicked away. Let's just call it SharePoint. And so what this is going to do is it's going to take us into Microsoft Forms. It is creating a form in the background. It's going to let us go ahead and design one of these things. But it's actually permissioning it to the group. It becomes a group-owned asset. It will put an Excel file representation of that form in the group library that you can go to see the results of your poll. So we can say, let's go ahead and do a choice. Where's the conference going? Well, I won't go through the whole thing here, but for those who haven't seen Microsoft Forms, it's a really nice tool, super lightweight. It actually has some nice things around interesting logic, repeated, required or not required. A nice ability to, I'll get rid of that guy, to view the responses back in Excel. So this is a relatively new member of the Office 365 Groups family, and we're excited that that's coming into SharePoint. Let me flip back to my library here. We are working to do as much as we can to surface the group's experiences directly into SharePoint. So we're integrated now with the new group card. So this is the same sort of idea when you hover over a person. We showed you the Delve-powered card for that person. We're doing the exact same thing for a group. It's a little bit early days on that still, but we are going to bring that exact same card in. Just like the Delve person card shows you relevant information about that person, we'll bring more and more relevant information about the group in there. We make it super easy to jump over to those other workloads when you want to hop over to Planner or whatever it might be. We're doing the same thing to make it easy to navigate in the left rail over here. So when I click Edit, and I go to the plus button, because this is a group site, a group connected site, we've added an easy way to link to these other group resources, whether it's conversations in Calendar and OA, or Planner, or that Teams conversation. If this was a group that's connected to Yammer, you would see Yammer showing up here as an option. Super easy to add one of those things and add that to the navigation, which is great. We're also trying to bring the group notions of membership and management directly into SharePoint. So you can see, I'm going to go back over to this one here. You can see we've got the list of members up here. New, relatively new, we can click on this and actually manage that list of members. So in this case, because I'm the group owner, I can even go through and change whether someone is a member or an owner. I can remove them from the group. I can add in new members so that we've got that whole experience right here. And then we've also got the ability to change some of the group settings. When you go over here to site information, again, because it's a group connected site, you actually get things like the privacy setting. Is it public or private? Does it have that classification in there? So that's one range of aspects where we're trying to bring group experiences into SharePoint. We're also trying to bring SharePoint experiences out into the rest of the group. So let me go over here and show you a page that I've been working on. There's a couple things interesting here. The first is this web part, which is a relatively new thing. This is the Bing News connector. So I think we talked about it briefly earlier today. Groups have had this idea of connectors, which are hundreds of ways to go and pull data from outside in the world, whether it's Bing News, whether it's Jira work items, whatever it might be, into a group context. So if you do that in OA, every time an interesting item comes in, it sends you a mail. If you do it in Teams, every time an interesting item comes in, it posts it to the channel where you've added the connector. In SharePoint, if you add the web part here, every time a new piece of information comes in, we just add it to the page. And you can decide, I've configured this one to show only the top few items here. So that's one way you can bring in group connected information. Let me add another interesting thing in here, which is the new Planner web part. I think we showed that earlier as well. You can see these are some of these connectors that we made available here. You can see them starting to show up. And if I look carefully enough, I will find Planner. There it is. And again, because we have that shared concept, that shared group that knows who we're working with and where we are, it automatically knows what plan to show, which is the one that's associated directly with this group. You can, of course, go over here and customize and choose a different group, a different plan if that's what you want. You can also show this chart view, which I think is a much nicer way to get the sort of quick summary here. I'm going to go ahead and publish that page. And now let's take this experience into Microsoft Teams. So let me go over here. And what we've done, we're going to show today for the first time is a Pages tab extension in Microsoft Teams. It's pretty early days on this thing. We're not ready to ship it right away, but I want just to show you the direction that we're going. So when I go over here to tabs, we are going to have an extended SharePoint one that lets me go in and pick more and more SharePoint content. I have to do a little bit of work here. And now again, because we have that shared team context, it knows that this team is connected to this SharePoint site, and this SharePoint site has this set of pages. So I can now just go ahead and click on the page that I want. I can say save. It's going to create a tab, and it's going to boost that page right into Microsoft Teams. And of course, as I edit the page in SharePoint, the same thing show up here. Over time, we'll talk about bringing edit capabilities directly into Microsoft Teams.
And I think one meta point just to point out here, if it's not obvious, we're in the Microsoft Teams experience. Looking at a SharePoint page, of course, there might be other context that's managed on the page that you would have in the SharePoint page itself. On the page, you have then an instance of pointing to Planner, and of course, an instance pulling from an external source. All of it is retaining where the original content stays. So you don't pull in the information and version it. You keep it, and it's live and dynamic data. So the page is live in Teams, the content from the web parts is live in the services that they're in. And really, you're giving the most rich experience you could offer to an end user, whether they hit it on their mobile device or not. Especially if a plan task changes, It'll get updated automatically wherever that page is, even in Microsoft Teams.
Yeah, and frankly, we often get a lot of people who ask us, should I use Teams or should I use SharePoint? Which one should I use? And the answer is, of course, you should use Teams or SharePoint, or Teams and SharePoint. Wherever you need to go to get your work done, that's where we want you to work. The shared content service is powered underneath, no matter what you're doing. The full capabilities of SharePoint surface through in Teams, if that's where you want to have a chat-focused collaboration. Let me show you one other preview of something we're doing in Teams. Again, pretty steaming hot, but I wanted to show it off, which is integrating news into Teams using the connector model. So again, just like we have an Office 365 connector that can bring in some of that outside content into Teams, we're going to do the same thing with news. So in this case, I have my team site over here. I'm going to create a new news article. We'll try to make it pretty so that it has a good preview here. Hang on just a second.
While Jeremy's building this out just for a second, when you create news in a SharePoint team site or a communication site, or now even at the level of a hub site, as you create the news and you publish it, once it's published, of course it's going to appear on that site. It's going to flow up to all of the relevant people's SharePoint home. There's a news web part at the top of SharePoint home, which aggregates news from all of the sites that you are active in, or other people that you're related to work-wise are active in. Of course, it flows into the SharePoint mobile app. That's the news tab, or the news per each site that you go in and visit. But it also now, like you're seeing, we're extending the service to be able to service it in an automatic way for that news item once it's published, to increase the reach to the right people. For a Teams experience, it's the right place to go have a chat around the news. And like you see happens here, it really adds an extension to that whole news service.
Yeah, so again, we've published the news, and as Mark says, that triggers a bunch of things. It starts to display it here on the site. If you had it followed the site on your phone, you would get a notification about that. We also start to use graph-powered notifications so that my colleagues, the people who work for me, get notification about this news. And then, if everything is working right, we also post it in Teams. Come on! You can see all my previous ones were working. Let's try a refresh here and see if it comes through. Right, I actually published it. That's always a good sign. All right, demo luck is running out on me today. As I say, it's pretty early still, but you can see that when it works, we're actually able to bring through the image and get you a pretty rich preview going there. And then, of course, when you click through, it just takes you back into that SharePoint experience. Okay, so those are the ways that we are working on integrating SharePoint and groups into SharePoint. The last thing I want to talk about is some work that we've done to empower the people who are in charge of a SharePoint site, the owners of that site, which are the owners of a group that's connected to a site. Oh, it still doesn't show up. Okay. That's too bad.
Is it there?
Oh, there it is, exciting opportunities.
Nice, the image didn't come through, I think is the thing.
Yeah, I don't know my images.
But really the tail end there is, of course, if somebody wasn't on the Teams site and they're in their Teams app on their mobile device or here on the web, they would see that and automatically be able to start a new thread. And everybody in that thread would, of course, have the link back to if they wanted to read the full article, or maybe the title gave them what they need, and like, yeah, I saw that, and they wanted to then start have a conversation around it. And that's the whole point. Raise up the level of, hey, there's something new, or there's something that you should have your eyeballs on, and then I want to hear from you. I want to engage with you. I want to, get the feedback, or just ask a question, something like that. Great.
So let's focus on that site owner real quick, and then we'll move on with a few more things in the deck. If you're creating a site, or if you're creating a group, there's probably a reason that you're doing it, and you had some intention in mind for how people were going to use that group, how they were going to visit the site, how they're going to participate in the content. We really want to empower the site owner to bring that team along in the direction they want it to go, and to feel like they can be a steward of the site, that they have good insight into what's happening, and that they're able to see whether the content is being used in the way they expected. So here's some preview of some stuff that we're going to be adding in. We expect to do more and more of this over the next year. The first is site usage. So what we've actually brought here is a nice graphical view of both the number of unique viewers and the total number of visits to content on the site over time. You can see the last week, the last 30 days, all the way up to the last 90 days. We'll go back over there. We're going to give you a sense of what the trending content is here. So you can see what's the top content that's being used on this site. You'll get a sense of how many views it's had, how often it's happening. And then we also want to make sure that we help site owners be responsible stewards of their content. So we've added this shared externally view. This is actually the same view that a compliance admin would get if they went to the Office 365 Compliance Center and did a compliance search for items viewable by external users. But of course, in any given company, there's only a handful of compliance officers who can do that. So we're bringing this directly to the site owners. We're running that exact same query here. And it's useful sometimes to get a sense of like, hey, okay, I'm happy that my people are collaborating externally, but I want to get a better sense of who is using this particular file. So you can go over here and we show you the permissions right away. You can see that it's got one of those handy sharing links. And if you want to remove that, you can do that. You can also see the specific external user it was shared with, and you can always go ahead and stop sharing to that user. So that's one thing that we're doing to help site owners be more in control and more responsible stewards of their content. The other thing we're doing, Mark mentioned this notion of required metadata and what happens when you're missing required metadata. We're bringing out what we call the attention view, which will help call attention to things on the content on the site that needs a little bit of extra love. So the first thing that we're showing off in the attention view is missing metadata. So in this library, the audience column is required. And you can see that we've got a few that are missing the required information. So we highlight that right here. We put a little yellow mark. We make it super easy to fill these things in. This is great for people who are using the library, and as they're scrolling through, they realize, wow, I need to do a little bit of work on this thing. We also created a separate view that we think is most useful for owners, which is if you go over here, we've got this files in the attention view. This is now going to pull together every file across every folder, no matter how deep in that library that's missing required metadata. You'll get to see it all in one place, and as an owner, you can, hopefully you don't have a list that looks quite like this, but you can always go through, excuse me, and take care of those sort of cleanup tasks, or you can find the users who have not been, it seems like Mark is the,
oh, no.
the worst victim when it comes to not filling in required metadata.
Besides me excusing myself, do we have any content managers or people that might care about metadata that are really impressed with that? Yeah.
Here and there. Good.
That's one of those that I saw, and I've certainly been working with SharePoint for a long time, and I'm definitely a user / power user sometimes. But I'm not a content owner from a center or a library that's got a ton of content. But when I saw this, I thought, man, that is really a useful tool because that is useful to fill in the metadata, but it's also really useful to know, if we bulk uploaded a bunch of content or migrated from site to site and there were some rules on that library that weren't in the original source, this will call out that there's some things missing that help us catalog, help us search and find, and super helpful to see that in one consistent view.
Yeah, and we'll do continued innovations. More and more things we'll bring to that in addition just to metadata. But that's where we're starting with, and this will be coming out quite soon.
I'll work on those fields when I get back.
Yeah, please, before the next demo, please. Okay, with that, I think we'll go back for a little bit more context and slides while we all mentally prepare for the next wave of demos.
So we built out this slide because we really wanted to land on what's the value of SharePoint, and certainly in lots of different workspaces, workloads, groups that are working together, and what they're really trying to accomplish. Of course, it's a lot of things. You might think of the old SharePoint pie. What am I going to buy SharePoint for? Oh, it does BI, it does search, it does social, it does sites, it does pretty much anything, we think sometimes. And sometimes we want to double down and really be clear on what can you do with SharePoint. And so when we introduced, not too long ago, a new site type for us, which is called a communication site, the concept of having a place to go to distribute broadly across the company is certainly not new. But the way that now both team sites and communication sites work, they're really quick and easy to create, very easy to add content to. You don't even have to think about mobile, and they certainly persist through the changes of what your business is doing, especially as you org and reorg. But we want to land on some of the scenarios of what do you use a team site for, and then, of course, different scenarios to kind of answer that question that came up when we launched communication sites. What's the difference between the two? When do I use one versus the other? And it seems to be kind of a resonating trend in terms of when we release some new capabilities, or certainly a lot of what our other teams are doing, clarity around what is the scenario, what's the use case. And so we've listed a few out here. Some are pretty straightforward. Some are certainly applicable to both in terms of if you create an intranet place that you want external people to go, that would be extranet as well for a communication site. But I think the biggest difference is really what's at the bottom. As you go through the different use cases in your mind, is this for my department, a large set of people? Is it for a team? Is it for a project, a campaign that I'm working on? Is it the early days before we release it and share the news with everybody? That's a way to think of the left to right. On the left is really your working group, before things are final, things you don't want anybody but those 10 people to see. And on the right-hand side, when you're ready to launch the campaign, to launch the new product, to open up the new region where you're going to be having sales, and you want all those sales folks to be able to know what are some of the rules and targets of what we're doing in that specific region. On the left-hand side is really everything we've been showing you. It's group connected, which means all those members have access to all of the group applications. And of course, we spin that up from a provisioning perspective. On the right-hand side, when you spin up a communication site, it really is just its own thing. You can add whomever you want to it to be able to view, to be able to own, to be able to be a member. But it doesn't create a group, and it doesn't provision all of those other applications. And that's not good or bad, it's just specific to the use case. On the right-hand side is a few people working to broadcast to many, and on the left-hand side, it's really more everybody should have that same level of access in whatever the project is. So we think of left to right, really collaborating together, working on something in the early phases, to then turn to share more broadly across the company.
Yeah, the other thing we wanted to talk about, again, narrowing down with Team Sites and kind of recapping some things we talked about, is the governance model for Team Sites. And it's sort of a public service announcement because we get this question a lot, so we'll just try to nail it now. You're in a different world when your Team Site is attached to a group, because it is unlike the other Team Sites in SharePoint or communication sites or whatever template you're using that are not attached to a group. Specifically because, as we talked about before, that site is now attached to the policy and the life cycle of the group. And so that means you can't manage everything in SharePoint. It's a little bit of a partnership in how you manage those sites. And so when you're in this group connected world, there is a group policy which is set in Azure Active Directory, and you manage it through the Azure Active Directory PowerShell. That is where you control who's allowed to create group sites, what the available classifications are for those group sites, the life cycle, should there be auto refresh, auto deletion of those sites, the naming policy, what kind of names are they allowed to have, what words are allowed or not allowed, or is there a prefix or a postfix you have to put on. This is all stuff that's available today already out in the Azure Active Directory PowerShell commands. But as a result, it means that certain things can't happen in SharePoint. You cannot delete one of these group connected sites. And we did that from SharePoint. We did that very intentionally, because if you do that, you just deleted the content service for your group. And you've made Planner, you've made Teams, you've made Mail, you've made Calendar all sort of broken, because now they don't have a place to store their content. So you can delete the group, and the Team site will get deleted also. You can go to the recycle bin and undelete the group, and the Team site will also get undeleted and go with it, but you can't just go to SharePoint and delete that Team site directly. There are still a set of things you can do on the Team site, so those are the things on the other side of the slide. You can manage how group creation shows up in SharePoint Home. So on the Azure Active Directory side, you can decide who is allowed to create groups and not. On the SharePoint side, you get to decide exactly how that experience surfaces in SharePoint. If you want to manage storage quota, we hope most of the time you don't have to, but if you have a very explicit desire, that is a SharePoint-specific concept, so you manage that through SharePoint. And then SharePoint sites continue to support additional permissions, richness, let's put it that way, that you don't get in groups. And so if you really want to have a notion of not just owners and members, but also owners and members and visitors and other kinds of complex permission setups, you can still do that in SharePoint. That's going to apply to the site, but not to the overall group membership. You can have finer grained sharing policy. I think we have a whole talk on that. So if you want to decide that it's okay to share externally, but only to certain domains, or block particular domains from receiving sharing, you can control that on the SharePoint side. And then we'll talk about site design in just a minute. But then you use SharePoint Online PowerShell to manage all those SharePoint things. We took our lumps, I think, this morning in Jeff's session. We realized that people would like to manage all these things in the tenant admin UX as well, not just in the PowerShell. It doesn't work in today's tenant admin, and all the new UX that Navjot demoed this morning. You'll see all those same sites, and you can manage all these properties there. And there's a handy AKA MS link if you want to see the actual examples of PowerShell commandlets to run for these things.
So I think a good takeaway there too is if you yourself or you're in an organization that is sort of throw up your hands and said, we don't want to turn groups on, there's certainly a lot to learn, I think, about when you turn them on, the amount of control that you have, so that you can govern how they're used, who uses them, and certainly how you can look at it from a life cycle perspective. So we hope it challenges you to turn on groups or leave groups on, and certainly behind groups is certainly the team site, and the group-connected team site offers a lot to the end user or the team, and certainly I think it gives the affordance that IT can now manage them a lot better than they have been able to, and certainly some of it is more of a perspective. If you thought you couldn't, certainly go and review some of this material, and I hope you take away that you can.
Yeah, we're big believers in getting groups and self-service enablement on so that users are able to be productive. When you turn off groups and people cannot create their own groups and they need a place to go do teamwork, if you're not providing it to them, they are going to find their own. That's the lesson we've learned over and over and over again. And if they find their own, it will not be in your governance structure. You won't have the insight over it. So we really encourage letting people use those tools directly in the IT-managed tenancy and supported environment. Let's take another look at some demos real quick for some additional things that we're bringing in. This is something we heard a lot last year at Ignite when we showed off our modern experiences, and people said, hey, those are great, but how do I customize them? How do I do the things that we've spent 10 years doing in SharePoint with things like Designer, with things like InfoPath, with master pages to really make our SharePoint sites fit our organization, behave the way we want them to? We have a ton to talk about this year, so I'm feeling much better about that. And I'll show the demo in these 3 areas. We have stuff that works for pro developers, where they're writing custom code using the SharePoint Framework client extensions. We have things that are targeted towards the IT admin and sort of setting some tenant-wide policies, organization-wide policies. And then we've got work that's targeted directly at the end users of these sites, people who are creating sites and want to do their own work to make it come to the surface without writing code, without having to be tenant administrators and going through a bunch of things like that. So we'll take a quick tour. We have drill down sessions on all of these, so I'm going to go fairly light on them, but I did want to just sort of make the point here. Why don't we start off with Microsoft Flow? We saw a little bit of that in the keynote this morning. You can think of Microsoft Flow as a way to empower your team members to build lightweight processes directly into their SharePoint site. Things that are an important part of the way that the business works. You want to have a little bit more structure around how content moves around. In the past, you might have built some of these using SharePoint Designer with 2010 or 2013 workflow. We think if you're using the modern experiences in SharePoint Online, you're going to get a much better experience using Microsoft Flow. I'll just show you one that we have built in here. We added just a very simple one. This is actually not much of a business process, but it is a nice little tool where people want to be reminded about some content here. So this is using our new Flow Properties panel so that we're not just kicking off an anonymous workflow in the background. We can actually provide some properties, some parameters into this flow. In this particular case, I can say, hey, I want to be reminded about this content, in 14 days. And then I can tell myself, don't forget to finish this work. And if I go ahead and run Flow, it'll create it'll start the process, it'll come through in 14 days, it'll send me an email. So that's a very simple one. There's some more complex templates that are in here. The key thing about Flow is that it's meant to be an end-user friendly technology. It's not a coding solution. You don't have to know C#, you don't have to know JavaScript. You bring up the Flow Designer, you kind of piece these blocks together, and you get to see how they come, how you can bring these things to users. There's a whole session on Friday dedicated specifically to comparing what Microsoft Flow does relative to SharePoint Designer. So that's a great way to take a look at some of those things. Let's also talk about the column formatter. We got a small introduction of those things earlier. This is a super cool way to bring some customizations into the UX that doesn't require writing code. Not requiring code is great for 2 reasons. Reason number 1 means we are able to give you sort of a well-scoped sandbox language for doing these customizations, so you don't have to worry about cross-site scripting or other security vulnerabilities, because we've defined the language in a way that those things don't exist. And then because we've done that, there's no need for script editing permissions on the site. There's no need for being a tenant admin. That makes things much, much easier. So I'll just show you a little bit of a flavor here for how these things work. Again, there's a whole session on these. You go over to here, format this column. Now, I'm not going to claim this is something an end user immediately is going to pick up and is going to figure out, but we have some great documentation on this. And we think, really, it is for people who have been sort of the SharePoint customizers in the past, the kinds of people who feel like, yeah, I can edit a master page. I can figure that thing out. We think that's sort of the level we're at here. We do look forward to making this even more usable, more user-friendly over time with user interface elements to build these things. But again, there's a whole great session on how that's going to come together.
It looks like I actually typed that out on the Android phone earlier.
Yeah, it does look a little bit. At the end of the day, it's pretty basic though, right? We're doing some equality checks. We can even do things like directly integrate the flow in here. So here's a column where if you click this, it just actually brings up that exact same flow as before. So we think that thing is pretty cool. The other thing, of course, that people have always been interested in with SharePoint is customizing the forms and how your information is rendered. We saw this earlier. Chris McNulty did the demo. I'm just going to bring it up again here so we can see how cool it is. Come on. You can really feel the network doing its thing here today. So again, if you look at this library, right, when you go and you click on an item, we bring up a default SharePoint form that comes up here. And we have this little link up here called Customize. So in the past, you would have customized using InfoPath. Starting very, very soon, you will customize using Power Apps. Again, that brings up a no-code designer surface where you can build these kinds of forms. You can have interactivity in here, so I can choose to sign up. I've added myself in. You can really feel the network lag as it tries to render that picture. But we're super excited about bringing this capability back into the SharePoint Online modern experiences. We know a lot of people have been asking, when can I stop using InfoPath to manage forms? The answer is quite soon, so I'm excited about that.
Yeah, so basically Power Apps started by being able to build out mobile apps, certainly always for us based on lists and libraries. And it's really great to see the work that the Power Apps team is doing, which in the Microsoft house, they're in the Azure world. But the way that the SharePoint team and the Azure team has been working pretty tightly together and bringing alive lists and libraries, you see the first instance of embedding the Power App here in some of the forms that we have out of the box. And it's going to be really exciting to see what you all do in terms of embedding those experiences into your SharePoint pages. And
there's a drill down session on that. Again, we'll recap at the end. But Chris McNulty and Kerem Yusuchurk are doing that later on today to really get the details there. A couple more things now. We'll talk about sort of the ways that IT admins can influence the customizations in an organization. So the first thing is that theming that I think, Dan showed it off this morning with Jeff. So we've extended this change the look so that in addition to these out-of-box themes that we have where you can sort of quickly change the way that your site looks, we've also added the ability for IT admins to specify their own themes. And so it can be sort of a gently customized theme all the way to a fairly hardcore customization of the theme and the way you want that site to look. In this case, we're showing both our out-of-the-box themes and the IT-provided themes side by side. You are welcome to turn off the out-of-box themes. That's certainly an option you can apply as well. So we think there's a good set of flexibility here that we can bring to the table. And then the last thing I'll show is how you can tie all these things together into IT-provided site designs, which actually package multiple of these things into one go. So let's go over here and take a look at SharePoint Home. Ooh, you know what I didn't show? It's a good thing I left these things here. The other kind of customization I didn't show was the ProDev customization, so we'll hit that real quick. This is something that we announced earlier in the year. It's already been out in preview. It's coming to GA, which is the ability to write actual C# code, TypeScript code, using the SharePoint framework client extensions to add more and more extensibility into your SharePoint site. So in this case, we've added a little banner up here on top that describes some things, some status about this list that's going on. We've also added a more complex column customization. So this is not the kind of thing you could do with a column formatter that I showed you before. This is the kind of thing that takes custom code so that you can take a set of GPS coordinates and actually show a map in there directly. And then we've also got a custom button here so that we can take one of these adventures and it knows the context so that when I click on this thing, it can take me over to the right site. And again, it's got some of these extensions up here that enrich the site. So again, these are pieces of custom code. These do have to go through a tenant admin approval process before they're available to people in your organization. Okay, so how do we tie all those things together into these site design packages? Well, let's take a look. We're going to go over here and do Create Site. Again, you saw a preview of this earlier from Dan. When I go into Team Site, we used to not have any choices. By default, you click Team Site, and we just create you a group-connected team site, lightning fast. this organization has decided to add some extra choices. So here, as a user, I'm eligible to use the Travel Focus Project site design. So let's call
I think that's
this.
important to note too. When you put in your custom site designs or custom site themes, you can choose who's able to use them. So if a different user was logged in, you gave them the ability to create a site, but not one off this particular custom site design, they just wouldn't see it. You could have it so that they could see a separate list versus the list that Jeremy sees.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so what's happening in the background here, we'll see exactly how the timing works, is we are starting from that team site template, so the same template you would get if you created a group anywhere else. And then on top of that, we're running the site design and the site actions. And you can actually see it's kind of telling us here that it's working on these extra components. So this is a series of scripts that have been written by the IT administrator. In this case, we have gone ahead in the background and created a new customer list. We'll zoom in on those guys. A couple different lists. We've triggered a flow to do some extra workflow around this site outside of it. And then we've gone ahead and applied a theme. And so what you'll see is when I click finish here and we refresh, all that content comes back. So you can see we've actually got an updated homepage with a different layout. We've got one of these SharePoint Framework client extensions that's automatically applied to this site. We've got a custom theme that's here. This is, I think, pretty awesome. We've taken a bunch of customizations. Thank you. A bunch of customizations, and we sort of built them directly into the product in a way that IT can deliver the right sort of customizations and fit for the organization, but it's a direct part of the user experience that just flows naturally through. Users get a sense of what's going on. We have been working very closely with VESA and the Patterns and Practices team, so if you're familiar with that provisioning engine, this is inspired very, very heavily by that. We're working closely together to bring all those capabilities in, and then you can actually call out using Flow out into the P&P engine. So if there are things that we don't yet support in this new site design technology, you can still use P&P to connect those things together.
So quick show of hands, has anybody ever customized a SharePoint site? Leave your hands up if you've been waiting to be able to do that with modern sites. All right.
It's exciting.
It's very exciting.
Should we recap that quickly before we go on to the
yeah. So next two slides, we really have drill down sessions that we really want to let them take the ball and run with it because they are the people that are building the feature. And the first one is you saw us playing with some themes and certainly designs and showing you the things that you can do with out-of-box, things you can do, of course, to apply your own custom themes, custom designs. There's a whole session that goes into the depth of really how you can make this look like you want it to. And so Denise and Melissa?
Melissa, that's right.
Denise and Melissa. Denise is our lead designer, and Melissa really, her key focus these days is actually hub sites, making hub sites real. But in their session, they're really going to talk to you in terms of what happens when you apply a theme, what happens when you join a hub site, what can you do to customize that look and feel, and how you can make that as consistent as you want it to or as different as you want it to. And you get a sense here, this is a communication site that we're actually showing you. That has a hub site navigation element to it. So in essence, what you're seeing here is a communication site that's a part of a hub site that's adapted and inherited the theme from the hub, so it's consistent as you navigate all the way through and all the way down. But they've got a lot to cover here, and really you're hearing it from the people that are building the feature and actually happen to be designers that I would trust to do anything to make it look nice. Mark doesn't make things look nice, but certainly get the right designer in the room. And these folks are two of those that I certainly work pretty closely with. So if you look at it from an administration perspective, if you go to Denise and Melissa's talk, they really talk from an end user, power user, what you can do if you've been enabled. If you go to Sean Squire's talk, he'll really talk about how do you build a custom site theme? How do you build a custom site design? All those things that you saw in the progress bar, we call those site scripts. How do you build out your site script so that after the fact, when you load your paid design, it does all the right things that it needs to do in a light enough way where it's not a hard-coded template, but it's a very flexible design that you can change and adapt to as you make changes. And of course, where do you put those? Sean will go into the details of how you get your site themes and site designs into your tenant. And that's a tenant-wide gallery so that you have access from multiple site collections. You don't have to continuously pump them into every single site collection. And then finally, the scoping that we lightly mentioned in terms of when I sign in, I'm just going to see the custom site designs or the default site designs that are okay for my company to use based on me, the user, when I log in, what I'm able to use. And Sean will go into some depth, of course, about from an IT perspective, and he'll touch a little bit on what Jeremy was talking about at the end in terms of getting into the developer world of PnP and how you can influence and do some things there. But you've already heard the big announcement. But I really want to hand it over to Jeremy because it's his team, specifically Melissa, but under Jeremy, that is really making hub sites real. So we certainly look at it as we're announcing hub sites for the first time today, but I'm going to hand it over to you and take us home with hub sites.
Yeah,
what are they?
Then a little bit more demo. I think, did everybody see the keynote this morning? Everybody? Yeah. Woo, hub sites. Yeah, just as a quick recap, this is something I've personally spent a lot of time thinking about over the past year. We talked about wanting to get self-service enabled, created for groups, so that any user in any organization can create the team sites and the communication sites they need to get their work done. We've been pretty successful with that, and we're excited by that. We realize that comes at a cost to people who are information architects or sort of knowledge managers, who, frankly get a little bit sort of excited when they see all these sites proliferating across the organization, and they think like, wow, how do I manage those things? How do I impose some structure on them? How do I actually connect all these things together? And so that's what we came up with hub sites. The idea with hub sites is that end users can still do their own self-service creation. They can create things in the way that they need, but IT can provide some structure and can say, look, in our organization, we're going to come up with 10 hub sites or 15 hub sites or 2 hub sites, whatever's appropriate. That's not going to be willy-nilly self-service. We're not going to have thousands of hubs, because that sort of defeats the purpose of having central organization. But once IT has created those hubs, then every end user who is a site owner gets to decide which hub their site participates in. You can only participate in one hub. You don't go to multiple hubs, but as easy as Dan showed to link sort of back and forth and say like, well, the site belongs here, and if there's a reorg, you can always move it somewhere else. And so we're trying to get exactly that right spot in the middle between self-service creation and empowerment and IT oversight and structure. And so let's just take another quick look at the demo and recap how those things come together so that lands for everyone. So what we're looking at here is a hub site. This is the Work at Contoso hub. And it really looks like most other sites with a couple distinctions. One is it has this shared navigation bar. So we have a little logo that we created for the hub so that everyone's immediately able to recognize when sites are part of a hub. We have this shared navigation that comes up here, and that's going to be shared across all the hub sites. And then what's interesting is if you look at news, you see that for the first time we have news on a site that is not just coming from that site. So in this case, we have a piece of news here that is coming from the Work at Contoso hub. But over here, we've got news coming from these other sites, from Benefits, from Live, from Give. And so these are things that because they're attached to the hub, we actually say it's important to roll those things up and aggregate up. The idea of a hub is both bottoms-up aggregation of activity, of news, of search, and also, do we have the activity thing in here? We do. So here you can see some of the activity coming through, what's happening on some of the sites that are part of this hub, so I can easily go through and click into those guys and see what's going on. And then the other part of a hub is actually pushing down some central management of theme and of nav and of brand. So let's take a look at how that works. This is a site that's already joined to this hub. In fact, you can get to it just by navigating here. I just had it open to make things easy. So this is its own site. It has its own news. It has its own activity. There's nothing really in this part of the site that says that it's part of a hub. But it does have that shared nav up there. And it did take the same theme that the parent hub site had. And so you'll see that same thing if we go over here. And let's add this guy to our hub. So we'll go to Site Information. And again, the sort of magic bridge between IT control and end user empowerment is IT creates the hubs, and then users get to choose which hub their site belongs to. And we can actually do a little bit better audience scoping in there so that IT can say, these users can join these 5 hubs, and these other users can join those 7 hubs instead. So the thing that I see in this list of hub sites I can join is targeted towards me as a user. And so I can go ahead and join that Work at Contoso hub. And if everything works well, you will see our nav come in. and you will see a dramatic change in theme. Okay, there we go. Yay! It's part of a hub. So again, we expect to add more and more capabilities into this to really get that notion of management exactly in the right ways. But today, again, it pushed down that nav, it pushed down the theme. I had that dark blue theme, it's replaced it with the shared hub theme, and then it'll start aggregating that news up as soon as the crawler updates and indexes all those things.
And I'll just share one of the pieces of feedback that we got that I think is a real tribute to what's the value of this, not only organizing sites together, but actually mapping to the dynamic changes of a company. Imagine through reorg or acquisition or just change of leadership in different teams. Maybe they want to move a site from one hub to another. As easy it was to join, it's as easy to unjoin. And not that there's value in join or unjoin, but there's real value in being able to replicate the business and the structure of that business. And if content needs to move, and it's a whole site in that case, it's super easy to join and unjoin. So that dynamic, how fast it was you saw up here, is how fast it will take you to do that when business changes or update.
Yeah, and it is a different approach from some of the previous organization concepts that we've had in SharePoint. They're still there, and you can still use subwebs and things like that, but we think going forward we want to use this lighter weight sort of linking approach to connect those things together. Let me show one last demo, just to land the point that all this stuff that we're building, it was super important to us that it not be only for new sites. We wanted to make sure that organizations, partners who've invested in SharePoint Online over the years are able to bring all this goodness to their existing sites. And so we have a whole session on this that Tejas is going to do later on about no site left behind. I will steal just a tiny bit of his thunder, but hopefully no more than Jeff and Dan already stole by just showing a few things here. So this is a classic STS-0 site that has been around. It's using the classic homepage. It's got some documents. The first thing I want to drill home is that all of our modern experiences can apply to any site that's out there. And so even this site, you can see I'm using the classic doc web part here. But if I go into the library, we have enabled the modern experience. So even in this site that's been around forever, I've got all my metadata, I'm going to have my filtering, I'm going to have my rich previews. All that goodness is going to come directly to this site. So that's a pretty exciting first step. We can also, of course, add those new beautiful modern pages to any site. So here's one I was messing around with. You can just go ahead, click New, and you can add any of these new pages. And of course, if you have existing pages that you created using wiki technology or web part technology, those pages are still there. But going forward, you can create these cool new pages. You can copy one of these guys and go off and run there. But the thing that we announced today that's particularly exciting is this notion of connecting an existing site to a new Office 365 group. We know that people really struggled with saying, I've got my site over here, and I really want to have a conversation about it in Teams. But when I created Teams, it made a new site, and how do I get my content from the old site? So we have a feature which I thought we called Connect to New Office 365 Group, but I learned this morning from Jeff Teeper.
Oh, don't say it again.
As you all know, is the great-grandfather of SharePoint. I think that's his official
Don't
title.
say it. You say it twice, and you say it 3 times, and then we have to change the UI.
Hashtag Groupify. It's out there, baby, so let's go. And we'll just run this thing through. So what we're going to do here in the background, I'm going to go as quickly as possible. We're using the same experience as when you're creating a new group. But in this case, while we are creating a new group object in the Active Directory, when it comes time to connect the content services to that group, we just take a shortcut and say, you know what, we already got one. We're just going to plug it in right there. And so I'll go ahead and finish that, and it creates all those things through. Again, Tejas will have a whole talk digging into the details on this thing.
Yeah, and if you're thinking in your mind sort of what do we do with permissions under this covers, obviously we're creating a new permissioning type object in Active Directory. Tejas is going to go into so much depth. And actually, if you take the time and read through the wizard just once before you maybe do it in bulk, you'll get a really good sense of the thought that the team put in so that those don't change. They just get enhanced so that the group applications you'll have access to. But the SharePoint site permissions go untouched until you adjust what the group can do for that site.
Yeah, so again, we've got
good depth.
All the content is still here. It's just now connected to a group. It appears to be, there we go. So we've got the same group card that comes up there. When you go over here to the edit menu, you're going to get all those awesome group connected points over here. There's some fine details. If you want Teams, you have to go over to Microsoft Teams and explicitly add it. That doesn't get added automatically, but Tejas will walk you through that. Okay, that is the tour of the exciting stuff. We're going to talk quickly about roadmap, very quickly, given where the time is. A bunch of the stuff that we showed, we expect to have out before the end of the year. There'll be a batch of things that come in October. The attention view, the column formatters, we hope to have those things out pretty quickly. Site usage, the Microsoft Teams integration, the themes and site designs will probably come closer to the end of this year. The planner web part will come closer to the end of this year. But you'll see a bunch of that stuff roll out. And then there is some stuff that's going to trickle out next year. Both the notion of hub sites, that's probably the big one that we aren't able to get done this year, but we're bringing it out to first release in the earlier part of 2018. And then we're going to keep doing this work on Groupify and getting that thing ready. We're going to keep bringing out more and more site analytics. So you'll get some site analytics, you'll get some branding and theming options this year, and you'll see more and more of those come out next year. What else? And then just to share what me and my team are thinking about for next steps in 2018, this is kind of the list of things that we're focused on, and we're going to spend, as Jeff mentioned, some time coming out of Ignite, listening to the feedback, understanding what our customers are doing, where you guys want us to go, and that'll sort of help us influence here. But we'll certainly continue to think about the group integration, both bringing SharePoint content services into those other group workloads and bringing content from the other group workloads and experiences directly into SharePoint. We're going to really take a renewed look at list productivity, and so how do you work with the largest of lists? How do you do bulk editing? How do you do import? How do you do export? How do you integrate with Excel? How do you think about summarizing and getting insights on top of list content? That's an area where we spent most of our time thus far just getting into the modern experience, and so I think we have an opportunity next year to really take that to the next level. We will continue thinking about document libraries, about metadata, about attention view. There's a feature that a few of you may have heard of called document sets. We will absolutely keep thinking about document sets. I've made Sue very happy. That's one usage of one. Document sets is interesting. I'll just tell you candidly, it wasn't on the list for this year because it's used by a very small % of our overall user base. And we had a set of things like managed navigation and metadata that we knew were broadly used. And so we're being very data-driven. We focused on those things. We've seen that as we've added those, we get more and more users into the modern experience. But at this point, when you look at the data, next up on the list is document sets. So we'll make sure we tackle that. Woohoo! Thank you. We will get there, I promise. And then lastly, we'll just continue to think about how you get this right trade-off between self-service and really empowering users to get their work done and the needs of IT and governance and organization and sort of keeping the SharePoint ecosystem healthy in your organization. We recognize that the more you do self-service, the more the burden is on us as a product team to really help you manage and work through those things.
So as a catch-all and to wrap up, and certainly if you have any questions, certainly they got microphones nicely set up. And the first person who wants snazzy feet like we have, it looks like we got a winner here
up already.
But just as a catch-all, hopefully you see what we're doing to make teams a lot more connected within themselves when they're doing their work, when they're sharing their documents, they're sharing their news and information, how that's more consistent across the different applications as they come into the fold beyond the team site. And certainly that we have rich experiences in both web and mobile, and the connection really to the broader ecosystem of your whole business, to be able to map to that and map to the changes, as of course it will change, whether you like it or not. We have a lot of great sessions.
Actually, I'm going to interrupt since people are walking out. Please do fill in your evaluation. We have a slide on that at the end, but it is something Mark and I will read every comment that's posted. It does help us think about what we're going to work on for the next year, how we structure our conversation for next year. So please don't forget to fill that out. And if possible, give us a higher score than the OneDrive team. Sit down the hall from us. So we can show those guys. All right, and back to the program.
Yeah. So we've got a lot of sessions that are related to what we talked about. These are mostly the things we referenced of the double clicks, where if you want to go learn more or see it really happening, this is more kind of the what is it. Those sessions are really focused on the how to use it or how to do it. If you look at what we're doing across, Jeff spent some nice time in the keynote, so we won't spend too much time here talking about all the great events that are happening. We're so fortunate to have a great community that puts on these events. We love to attend them. They're so well driven by our leaders in the MVP community, and of course anybody that's really on top of SharePoint, but for there to be trained at every level, from a small user group all the way up to something as a large event that we're looking forward to in May. A lot more places to go learn about, tons of blogs that were released today. If you ever have trouble finding information about SharePoint, that's an easy challenge for you. But certainly we want to make sure that you, if you have feedback, please provide it to us. If you have any questions, ask them now. We're not hard to find throughout the conference, or through email or through Twitter, really at any time. So thank you all for coming. Please have a great rest of the day. And I will curry out the socks, but you certainly...
it was back here. Vote back here for the socks.
Oh, did you beat him?
I was way over here.
All the way in the back right.
Oh, no. Is there another microphone that we didn't see?
I don't know. This is tough.
We each get one.
All right, you get left foot, right foot.
Everybody gets one sock. Great.
There's a ton more socks at the SharePoint booth.
Come see me. Come on.
I'll walk these back, but please start asking your questions.
All right.
So my question is about groups and how it's going to affect subsites. I know subsites is kind of taboo now, but will we be able to make subsites, link them to groups?
Will you be able to make subsites into groups?
Can't even say.
Not in the first round, certainly what we're doing with Groupify. It's something we're thinking about. It's a little bit hard because a bunch of those group policies apply at the site collection level. And so it starts to get pretty tricky if you have multiple subwebs that are attached to different groups as to what policy to apply. So it's a hard problem, and we're thinking about it, and candidly, we don't have a good answer yet. So it is not something I can tell you is coming, but we'll keep thinking about it.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. All right, gentleman over here.
Thank you. We invested heavily in client-side rendering because that was the way to go some years ago.
From Holland.
Is there any migration path? Because it's not really working with the modern view.
Oh, yeah. Oh, of course. You're welcome. Thank you for the good chocolate. Yeah, I turned it off. Oh.
You built extensions?
For visualization.
Using what kind of?
Client-side rendering. So JavaScript code.
Yeah, that you popped in.
If I'm on or not. You're not on now.
I'm probably not the right person to answer that all the way. So we do have a session on the SharePoint Framework client extensions, which are client-side rendered. So it's not, we had a technology called CSR. We didn't carry that particular technology forward when we built the SharePoint Framework. But the model is exactly the same, which is that everything is rendered on the client side. And so I don't know off the top of my head. Oh, wait, is Cyrus going to help? You know the answer?
You didn't add anybody as a member.
Rewriting client-side rendering using SharePoint Framework extensions.
Any permissions? But now
Rewriting client-side rendering
they'll be able
controls.
to site, no problem.
As,
But if they click into
yeah.
conversations,
So Cyrus is my engineering manager. So let me actually suggest you can chat with him. But we do also have a full session on the SharePoint Framework, and I know those guys will have a clearer point of view than I will.
Okay, thank you.
Let's rotate. Anyone else? Everyone's queued up here?
The hub sites?
Sorry, I hear a voice, not from here, though.
Oh.
Ah, there, perfect.
The hub sites. Do you know if there's any plans to be able to integrate the on-prem together with the online?
That is a great question. It's something we're thinking about. We don't have a plan just yet. Hub sites are not something we are anticipating will be in the next version of on-prem because we want to make sure we get it right in the service first before we ship it on-prem where it has the long-lived lifetime support contract. But we do think a lot about hybrid, and so I think there's potential certainly for a hybrid model. It's all powered by search. The roll-up is all powered by search, which already works in a hybrid configuration. The push-down is something we'd have to think about.
Okay. Thanks.
You'd find that useful?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I can see big uses for that.
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay. You showed how metadata is shown in the files, so in a Word file and with the SharePoint properties, I think.
Yes.
Is this also coming for on-premise, or?
Is that? I want to be careful. It's a capability of Word, but there is new code that runs on the SharePoint server, and I don't know if they've brought that onto on-prem yet, so we can follow up with that.
Okay.
Okay.
Hi, two questions. The first is a hub site navigation security trimmed?
The hub site navigation, there's actually two modes of navigation. So one mode is that it's just a list of nav nodes on the site, in which case it's not security trimmed. The other option, though, is you can pull from metadata nav.
So it would be security trimmed with metadata.
Whatever capabilities
are there today.
Yeah, honestly, it's not an area that I know super well, but I know that you can point it and say, go to that node in metadata nav.
Gotcha. And the second question is the flow, like doing flow approvals for publishing for publishing pages.
Yes.
Having an approval process.
Yes, there are two parts to that. One is we will be releasing in short order a flow action, which is called publish. So you can write a flow, and then one of the actions is you can say, publish this file in SharePoint. We are also thinking about natively integrating that into a SharePoint Pages library, and that's going to take a little bit more time. We'll get that publish action out there first, and then we'll natively integrate it in with content approval.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, sorry, I also have two quick questions.
Yeah.
One, did I hear you say that people get notifications when news articles are published? Is that only if they follow or if they're a member of that site as well?
Oh, you're going to make me remember the notification rules for news. There are notifications. They are graph-driven, so there's a bunch of heuristics that run. I think the rule is if you follow the site in SharePoint, so you click that little star button.
Computer or on the app?
Sorry?
Like from your desktop or through the app? Or
Oh, either way, either way. Once you follow it, you get news to that. And then I think the other heuristic is anyone who is near you in the address book. And I think the way they do that is it's your manager and your peers. I don't know 100% if that's right, but it's some sort of heuristic like that.
Cool, that's awesome. Second quick question is I was in the Microsoft project keynote earlier, and they were talking about a lot of really cool features that you get with the teams, like the planner and the conversations and how it's all sort of containerized. So you're automatically provisioned a SharePoint site through the PWA, the SharePoint Online. Is there a way to sort of teamify that SharePoint site, or would we be able to groupify, and would that provide the same kind of cool functionality?
You would groupify, yeah. So you're talking about the old PWA, not the new planner
The
stuff.
current Project Online.
Yeah. So PWA creates a site. Initially, our Groupify will only work with STS-0 sites, just to sort of make it a little bit more scope for ourselves. So I don't remember if PWA uses that template or if they have their own. No, Dan's shaking his head. No, they have their own template. So in the initial release of Groupify, we won't have a way to do that, but that's certainly the direction that we would go. And we'll keep talking with that team about better group integration. Thanks.
Hi. Conversations take...
Oh, sorry, we got to go all the way to the back, who I've neglected. I apologize. We'll round robin. Yep.
Yeah, thank you. Where do group sites fit into the picture? The default site being created for a group? It's not a team site, it's not a communication site, it's a group site.
It is actually a team site. So you're right. If you went back 2 years ago, when you created a group, not through SharePoint, but if a new group appeared in Azure Active Directory, SharePoint would say, it's time to provide the content services for that group, and we used a sort of one-off template that was not a full team site. And we don't do that anymore. So it's the same template that you get no matter how you create the site through self-service in SharePoint or through the group. It's a full team site. It has all those capabilities.
So what happens to the already created group sites?
The already created group sites should at this point all be upgraded to be fully capable. If you found one that isn't, the gentleman who wrote that code is sitting right there, and he will be very happy to run the upgrader for you. But we ran that actually quite some time ago, I think, right? That upgrader ran, yeah, it ran last year. I have not heard of a case where it missed, but if you have cases, please let us know. Okay, back.
Okay, yep. So conversations taking place in Outlook when you create a group, right?
Yes.
So
they can take place now. There's many other places.
Take place in a team as well.
Yep.
But do you have an intention of bringing conversations into SharePoint?
Yes, we have great intentions of bringing conversations into SharePoint. We have a group calendar web part today, which if you haven't seen is super cool. It pulls the calendar data from the Outlook group directly into SharePoint. We think a conversation web part makes a ton of sense. We just got to get to it.
Okay. So no roadmap for that just yet. But
I'm looking at these guys. I don't know if we.
No one wants to say anything though.
Wait, look, honestly, it's really hard to predict a date if we haven't started, and so it's on our backlog, but we'll know once we get started how long it'll take.
All right, thanks.
I don't mean to be, I can get around to the next session.
Yeah,
but
all right.
Good job.
Thanks.
So I've got 2 questions, but actually one about that group calendar web part. Is that available today?
It is.
Okay, so I need to find that.
Okay.
When you go from Teams and you look at the files in a SharePoint site and you see them there, is there any thought to bringing in the capability of leveraging the views that are available in your SharePoint site so you can leverage them within Teams also?
Yes, there's a great deal of thought. So we are actually working right now on literally using the exact same web control that powers SharePoint and making that available in Teams so that all that metadata, all the views, all the pinning come through.
Awesome. And is there any thought to whenever you have somebody who's a group owner, you set that whenever you create the group, automatically making them the SharePoint site owner? Today it just makes them a site member.
No, it should not. When the SharePoint site is provisioned, we make the SharePoint, it's a little bit intricate. The SharePoint site collection admin is the group owner's claim. And then the group members, I'll show you real quick.
Okay, because that's not.
Let's show. So if we go to, let's go to one that I know is going to work. So if you look, the sort of easy way to see it is if you just go over here to site permissions. What it'll say is the site owners are the group owners, and the site members are the group members. Behind the covers, if you were to go look at the SharePoint owners group, let's see if this works. Oh, that doesn't work. That's what I get for trying to type things indirectly. Sorry, one more. Users.aspx. User, who remembers the single? There we go. So you're right that if you look here, it's empty.
Right.
But that is because we actually put them over here in site collection administrators.
They're made site collection administrators.
They're the site collection administrators.
I think that's what I was saying.
And this is a display bug. What this actually represents is the owners of the group, or the site collection admins.
So the old 365 group owners are effectively the site collection owners.
That's correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
All the way in the back.
So a couple of questions. First one's with Power Apps. One of the things I've been waiting on is being able to add a simple attachment to a Power App and put it inside of a form, a page, whatever.
Yes.
A few months ago I tried it, didn't happen, and so I've been following some site where you do the votes every day with no updates. So I'm curious if that's going to be rolled out anytime soon.
It is. We were honestly hoping to be able to show it off here, and at the last minute we found some additional issues, but that is an active project that we expect to wrap up by the end of this year.
Sweet. Second question is, say, current site, and we kind of want to roll into this new concept with the modern UX. Sites that are already provisioned and managed via AD security groups, if we want to flip those around and try to make these into team sites and recreate, add it to a specific hub, things of that nature, what happens when it wants to ask, oh, hey, we need to create these groups, but I'm not giving my site users in the middle of Uganda access to be able to go build and change things that are a company standard? Is that going to affect like the security groups that are already as managers that are currently there, or is it going to spin up all brand new security groups and just completely destroy what we've already created in our information security session?
I can guess which one you would prefer based on your language. Yeah, so let's actually separate out 90% of what you were talking about and then 10%. So the 90% is, can I get the modern UX? Can I join a hub? Can I use Power Apps? Can I use Flow? All that stuff, you can do it without being connected to a group in any way. So go. All of your existing security stuff stays there. Add it to a hub, party on, flip the modern UX on. That's all great. If you want to connect to a group, and create a group, then you as the person doing that groupification are faced with a choice, which is the group has to have members, right? Presumably the reason you connect to a group is because you want to use Microsoft Teams, or you want to use the Outlook calendar, or you want to use the Planner task board. And those things need to have a list of members if they don't understand AAD security groups. And so you have to make some choices about is it worth it to you to go through some exercise to turn those things into Office 365 groups as opposed to standard security groups. We don't try to do anything super clever on our side because we're actually worried about getting it wrong. So right now we start you with a group with an empty permission list, and we sort of let you build that back up. There are going to be some cases where we think we can get an interesting heuristic. So if your site doesn't have an AAD group, a security group attached to it, and you just have a list of 5 people in the SharePoint members group, then we think it's probably pretty reasonable to say, oh, do you want to take those 5 people and make them the members of this Office 365 group? But for more complex, sort of centrally managed permission scenarios, you'll need to do some more complex planning around it.
Okay. A follow-up to the gentleman before, when you were showing, like just here, when it adds whoever creates it into that site collection administrators group.
Yep.
So every team that's created is a separate site collection.
That's correct.
Right. And so does that affect like overall like number of sites and storage and whatnot for that company, for that particular tenant? And those of us who are portal administrators, I had to write a script to check every night to see who, if there was a new team created, to go in and drop myself and the user security administrator into those groups to allow us to have access to them, because we were getting questions about, hey, I can't find this site, can you give me access? And we're like, we have no idea what you're talking about.
Yep. I personally feel bad about that it's taken us so long to get there. So let's see, 2 things. At a technical level, the new tenant admin UX will list all these sites. So that will make life easier. It already works, as you know, in PowerShell, but people want it to work in the UX. We're gonna fix that in the new thing. And then in terms of, you know, does it count as sites that accrue towards the total number of sites in the tenant? The answer is yes, they are real sites. We are continually expanding the limits on how many sites that we can handle, and frankly, one of the original reasons that limit was in there was because the old tenant admin UX looks up in a single database table all of the sites that are attached to a tenant. And the reason these group sites didn't show up was because we optimized for efficiency and didn't write them into that table, which means it's actually a little bit cheaper for us to build and maintain those things. And so, yes, they are real sites. If you're concerned about limitations that it's hitting, I'd love to hear more about that. Because we do want people to self-service create those things without, you know, IT feeling like there's a bunch of pressure to rein it back in. The last thing I'll say in terms of your point about, hey, we don't know what people are doing, or we need to take an extra step when a site is created, we are pretty close to being able to talk about using Flow to get in the way of site creations. So that as an admin, you can say, I love self-service site creation. People should create whatever they want, but I'm going to get a mail and I'm going to get a chance to run something custom before that thing completes. In fact, if you go to Sean Squires' talk this afternoon at 3, we already have the ability to, I talked about those site designs and I showed the custom one, that Contoso travel plan thing. You can actually make a site design the default. So you don't have to add another named entity. You can just say, in my organization, anytime someone creates a team site, here's the site design that has to run. And again, it can call out to Flow. And so you can actually sort of build it on top of that existing capability, or that new capability, so you can create your own flows to manage those things. But we will, I think, next year make that more of a first-class notion in the product to address those concerns.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I lost track. We're back here. Okay.
So I have 3 questions. So first one is about unique visitors. So how are you calculating it? Is it based on the IP or is it based on...
In the site usage and analytics, we track unique directory users.
Okay.
So,
but in existing, you are calculating based on the IP, right? In the classic.
When you say existing, you mean in the old audit logs? Yeah, I actually don't know that tech very well. I'll trust you if you say that's how it works. On the new one,
it's on the MSDN article.
Okay, yeah. So the new one will be based on signed in user.
Okay. So another question is on the document library.
Mhm.
So whenever we add a content type, so we miss all those default templates. Whenever you click on the new button on the document library.
Huh, really?
Yeah.
I thought we had, I'm looking at Cyrus. Templates from content types showing up on the new button in modern UX? I thought that worked, right?
The default templates like OneNote and Visio.
Oh, I see. You're saying once you put content types in, you don't get the default set of stuff.
Right.
Yeah, SharePoint's behaved that way for a long time. I don't actually
it's
know.
like a request, so can you consider it?
Yes. Let's put that on our backlog, Cyrus. Yeah, thanks.
So another one is about external sharing.
For that as well.
Excellent.
So it's about external sharing.
Yep.
So you are an external user, so I'm sharing a document to you.
Yes.
So you did not click on that. You are forwarding that email to your developer, and
Yes.
he's clicking on that. So in existing, he can view the document. But in the modern experience, are you restricting it, or are you?
Yeah, there's actually a whole session. There's a gentleman named Eugene Lin who's got a whole session on the new options for sharing. We're going to have two modes. One is the one that we showed in the keynote this morning, which is going to be really restricted to that email address. And so when you click, it's going to send you a code. You have to put the code in. And so if you forward it to someone else, they're not going to get the code. But we will also continue to support forwardable links so that everyone who receives the link can make it work. And then as an admin, you can decide what capabilities you want enabled on what sites.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, question about the new tenant admin. When is that shipping? When is that going live?
I don't know offhand. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Does anyone, I'm looking if anyone on the team knows. No, I can follow up, or they have a booth downstairs. It's just, since it's not my feature, so I don't want to promise something they're not signed up.
Also, other question, Jeff this morning showed like the list with lots of items.
Yes.
So does that mean we don't have to deal with the view threshold anymore?
Okay, I practiced for this question, so let me see if I've got this right. We do have a new technology that we're calling predictive indexing. So the view threshold you would hit anytime the UX had to show more than 5,000 items without an index. If you manually manage the index, you could always make that thing work. But it was really hard to manage the index. That was one problem. You knew you had to go do it. And then the second problem was once you got over 5,000 items, you couldn't add an index. And so, so if you forgot to do it, you were kind of stuck for all time. So we are fixing those two things specifically. The first thing we're fixing is you can now add indices to any list up to 20,000 items. We're working on a feature to add it to a list of any size, but we have to do that in the background because you can't create the index that fast. And then the second thing that we've done is we have added what we call predictive indexing. And so based on the views that you're creating and the filters you're using, when you sort columns, if we see a view that doesn't have an index, we'll in the background, we sweep through and say, oh, you should put an index on there because you're going to want that someday. And increasingly in the UX itself, if you do a filter or a sort that doesn't have an index and the list is less than 20,000 items, we'll add the index right there for you. So we think that covers a bunch of cases where people hit the view threshold. It does not cover every case. It doesn't cover a bunch of API and programmatic things. But our hope is that fewer and fewer users ever encounter an index threshold.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Will that pertain to like if they have like a lot of people want to export to Excel and once they hit the 5,000 item limit, that breaks? So will that now be, I don't know why you'd want to export 20,000 items, but I have a user that once we hit that limit, even exporting a small amount of items quit working. So does that limit go up now to the 20,000 item?
I don't know if export to Excel would
I think,
change.
So yeah, this is, yeah, I think what I would say is, so this is, I was trying to make this distinction between things we're doing in the UX and things that you have to work on the API. The API would now be capable of it. I don't think we've done the work yet so that when you click the export to Excel button, we use the index to page through the items, but we should totally add that to our backlog.
Yeah, because that's something that everything broke once, even if we'd index the list and so that you can continue viewing items in the list itself, everything else broke that our users were like, ah.
Yeah. Thank you for the feedback. We'll make sure we work on that. All right, do we drain the queue? Thanks for sticking around.